Hello, and welcome to another Poetry on the Patio. Well, we're not on the patio because they're doing construction and stuff on the patios of my apartment complex. So I guess it's Poetry in the Boudoir. As you can see, it's Halloween, and this creation was based on a character I created when I was 5 years old. His name was Roadmaster. Roadmaster was, this is the origin of Roadmaster, was when I was about 5 years old, my sister's bike was stolen off our front porch, and my dad was reporting it to the police department, and I overheard him say that it was a Roadmaster. Well, my 5-year-old brain didn't know that Roadmaster was a brand name of bicycle, and he proceeded to describe the Roadmaster. He said it was red and black and about 21 inches tall. So at the time, I thought Roadmaster was this really short red and black man. And I proceeded to create stories about him and all his adventures and misdeeds. And my family really loved the stories and didn't necessarily have the heart to tell me the truth because, yeah, they thought it was so adorable, the stories. And I guess it kind of started my journey as a writer. Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the works of Silko, Bernstein, Forsche, and Harjo. First, I would like to start with, um, let's see, Leslie Marmon Silko. I say Marmon because I grew up in Louisiana speaking French, but she might have pronounced it Marmon. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, I guess I will go into some of the notes I wrote. Leslie Marmon Silko is Lacuna Pueblo and is in the first wave of Native American Renaissance. According to an article on Wikipedia I found, the Native American Renaissance is a term originally coined by the critic Kenneth Lincoln, and that to categorize the significant increase in production of literary works by Native Americans in the late 1960s and onwards. The Native American Renaissance has three elements, which include reclamation of heritage through literary expression, discovery and reevaluation of early texts by Native American authors, and renewed interest in customary tribal artistic expression. Silko was a debut recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Grant. The MacArthur Foundation Grant is also known colloquially as the Genius Grant. It is given to individuals who have shown extraordinary creativity and dedication in their creative pursuits, and a marked capacity for self-direction, and are citizens of the United States. And the first poem I'm going to look at is called Long Time Ago. This poem gives a fictional account of the origin of white men. It reminds me of a story my great-grandmother passed down through my family. My great-grandmother was a Cherokee who was on the Dawes Rolls. She and her family were removed from their lands when she was a teenager. She told my grandmother passed on a story, and my mother told the story like this. In the beginning, the Creator had created the world. He decided to create people. In his kitchen, he got some dough together and made the first batch of people. He left them in the oven too long, and they were burnt. So the Creator sent these creations to Africa, and they became the black people. The Creator then decided to make a new batch of people. This time, he didn't leave them in the oven long enough. So he sent these people to Europe, and they were called the white people. And then on his third attempt, he got the recipe just right, and they came out a perfect golden brown. So he sent them to America, the best place in the world, North America. And these were what became known as Native Americans or Indians or First Nations, depending on where you're from. For many years, I thought this was just some silly story that my grandmother made up. And then I heard someone else recall, who was Native American, recall a similar story. So now I wonder, okay, is this a regular part of Native American or First Nations mythology? As far as the creation of people. The next poem by Silko I'm going to look into is called Prayer to the Pacific. In one verse, she states 30,000 years ago, Indians come riding across the ocean carried by giant sea turtles. Archaeologists and anthropologists believe that Native Americans immigrated to North America from the Asian continent. Their belief is that they immigrated across the Bering Strait back when there was a land bridge at that locale. The turtle also plays a major role in the Iroquois creation story, which you can look up online almost anywhere, and also in Stephen King's It. The good or constructive entity is a turtle, and the turtle is the antithesis of the destructive entity that in the book is called It, which is a giant spider. Which also, you think about it from a anthropological point of view, a lot of cultures have a story about a trickster spider. Like one that comes to the top of my head is a Nazi, I think it's called, in Africa. I also think there's like one called Ictomy or something like that in Native American lore. I'm not quote myself on that, but it's worth looking into. Now, next poet we're going to talk about is Bernstein. Okay, now this section I'm going to talk about a poet by the name of Charles Bernstein. No, Charles Bernstein is not a bear. I checked. So I guess we will not be learning any morals or life lessons from books about his family. Bernstein is a prominent member of the language poets. This group included Lynn Heinigen, which I had previously studied in my poetry course, which I was not a big fan of hers when we studied her. I found her experimental use of language to be too out there for my personal taste. I like my poetry in prose to be straightforward. Between going to school full-time and working full-time, I just don't have time to be deciphering cryptic writing and verse. Now, I agree with Bernstein when he says, I hate artifice in Autonomy is Jeopardy. The only artifice I enjoy is in my diet. This comes in the form of artificial colors and flavorings. You have to admit, that's just downright yummy. Artificial colors and flavorings. Oops, I got my hand over the camera. But see, like these. Starburst. Artificial colors and flavorings. They're just yummy. So I'm going to read Autonomy is Jeopardy to you. I hate artifice. All these contraptions. So many barriers against what otherwise can't be contested. So much seeming sameness in a jello of squirms. Poetry scares me. I mean it. It's virtual or ventriloquized. Anonymity. No protection, no bulwark to accompany its pervasive purposivelessness. Wow, that word is a mouthful. Which is a translation from a German term used by philosopher Immanuel Kant, defining the non-utility and autonomy of the aesthetic object. We learn something new every day. Write that down on your Word of the Day calendar. It's a creative acceleration into what may or may not swell. Eyes demand counting the nowhere, seen everywhere. Behaved voicelessness. Everyone is clawing to get a piece of. Shudder. All you want. It won't make it come any faster. Last any longer. The pump that cannot be dumped. I guess also it could be a commentary on the pretentiousness of the study of poetry in general. Because you think about it, for instance, Shakespeare's sonnets. with fortune in men's eyes, or thou art not unlike the sun, and all that stuff. There's just a certain amount of pretentiousness, especially to people who study poetry. They're like, oh, the imagery in Emily Dickinson transcends neo-romanticism. And it sounds like just throwing out a bunch of $10 words. When really, Emily Dickinson just needs some Prozac. And some Zoloft. And maybe a little bit of Seroquel. Or a nice padded room somewhere. I think, Bernstein is touching on what we see in a lot of, what's considered classic, or especially in academia. Well, I noticed I did like one eye look really super crooked. I know it's not the point, but it's funny when you notice these things. But yeah, it's basically is that artifice is everywhere in literature. And there's another poem here I wanted to read called The Kiwi Bird, which the kiwi bird is a bird that's indigenous to Australia. And also people who are from New Zealand are called Kiwis. I want no paradise, only to be drenched in the downpour of words. Fecund with, I don't know that word, I think it's fecund, with tropicality, fundament beyond relation, less real than made, as arms surround a baby's gurgling, encircling mesh pronounces its promise, not bars that pinion, notes that ply. The tailor tells of other tolls, the seam that binds, the trim, the waist, and having spelled these names, move on to toys or talcums, skates, and scores. Only the imaginary is real, not trumps beclouding the mind's acrobatic versions. The first fact is the social body, one from another, nor needs no other. Which I think it kind of relates to some of the themes in, as far as artifice, that we found in Autonomy is Jeopardy. Is that what really is real? Could the imaginary be the most authentic thing that's there? Because one's imagination, what exists in one's mind is usually not polluted by outside sources. It gets like really into like the sophists, which you find out like in a basic philosophy class or epistemology. There's a lot to think about there. What is real? Is what we think is real actually real, or is it just opinion? Who knows? Are we even real? Because there's been sometimes I wonder, it's like, are we an illusion that's in someone else's mind? Like in Being John Malkovich, or sometimes I wonder, like, we're like a TV show on another planet. And maybe sometimes, like something is thrown into our lives. It's because the aliens are getting bored. So the TV executives are throwing in something to make the show more interesting. I know this may sound pretty trite, but there's a lot to think about. The next section will be going into Forsche. Now, in this section, I'll be talking about Carolyn Forshay, which she is a former Beirut correspondent for NPR's All Things Considered. I think it's the name of the show. I've listened to it a couple of times on NPR. Yes, it's All Things Considered. I didn't want to cite her for the wrong show. And also she worked for Mission Amnesty International in El Salvador from 1978 to 1980. So she's a worldly person. The first poem I want to talk about is called Taking Off My Clothes. I'm drawn to this just because the title. I take off my shirt. I show you. I shave the hair out under my arms. I roll up my pants. I scraped off the hair on my legs with a knife, getting white. My hair is the color of chopped maples. My eyes dark as beans cooked in the south. Coalfields in the moon on torn-up hills. Skin polished as a Ming bowl, showing its blood cracks its age. I have hundreds of names for the snow, for this all of them quiet. In the night, I come to you, and it seems a shame to waste my deepest shudders on a wall of a man. You recognize strangers. Think you live through destruction? You cannot explain this night, my face, your memory. You want to know what I know? Your hands are lying. I think that this is about, all the things that a woman goes through to be attractive to a man and realizing, what is it all for? It's like that Dina Carter. She was a country singer in the early 90s. She had an album called Did I Shave My Legs for This? And I think it's pretty much what Carolyn Forshay is saying. You know, I did all this for you, and you're just nothing but a shell of a man. You're nothing. But yet, society expects her to go to such great lengths to be attractive for men. Let's see, what do I want to read next to you? Well, there's only a couple more poems, so I'm so sorry. Guess I'll go with the Memory of Elena. We spend our morning in the flower stalls, counting the dark tongues of bells that hang from ropes waiting for the silence of an hour. We find a table, ask for paella, cold soup and wine, where calm light trembles years behind us. In Buenos Aires, only 3 years ago, it was the last time his hand slipped into her dress, with pearls cooling her throat, and bells like these chipping at the night. As she talks, the hollow clopping of a horse, the sound of bones touched together. The paella comes, a bed of rice and camarones, fingers and shells, the lips of those whose lips have been removed, muscles, the soft blue of a leg socket. This is not paella. This is what has become of those who remained in Buenos Aires. It is the ring of a rifle report on the stones, her hand over her mouth, her husband falling against her. These are the flowers we bought this morning, the dahlias tossed on his grave in bells, waiting for their tongues cut out for this particular silence. I guess, as far as like spending their time in Buenos Aires and, talk about these are the people who remained, I guess it means, people who remain stationary at one point in their lives. It becomes like an artifice, going back to Bernstein, of a life. And also paella, if you ever had it. It's a delicious dish, by the way. In fact, I have a story about one time I tried to make it, almost set my apartment kitchen on fire. That's for another day. Anyways, paella is like a mixture of different ingredients, and a lot of times, when you make like seafood paella, you put like the mussels in there, and the shells open up, and it looks like lips. And it's very aromatic. It's just a mixture of all kinds of things, Paella is similar to like a jambalaya you find in Louisiana. It could be anything. It could be anything, everything. There's no like right or wrong way to make it. And I think that's why she's using the vision of the paella. Because paella is, I think it's like the national dish of Spain, if I remember right. And Buenos Aires is, it's in Argentina, which is a former colony of Spain. And how these things intertwine. And at the end, we have all these experiences. But all in all, they're kind of hollow. And at the end, we're all going to die. It's depressing in a way, but it's true. And I think Forsche captures this very well in this poem. In the next section, I'm going to discuss Harjo. Okay, Joy Harjo is of Muskogee Creek heritage, so she is a Native American or First National, just like Silko. And her works deal with the mythical and natural, which I guess you could say she's the kind of like, God, what is his name? Gonna brain fart. I want to say Marquez. He wrote Love in the Time of Cholera. That's the one that's the one I'm thinking of. He was known for mystic realism. That's what I'm thinking about comparing her to. And her prose is very different. I want to show it to you. As you can see, it resembles paragraphs. And I guess that you could say that she is part of the Native American Renaissance, in which in our book, it appears there's only one. Actually, it's a couple of pieces by her, but they're all written in this style. And they're all about being at one with her heritage, in which that right there would put her as a Native American Renaissance artist. Because if I remember right, the 3 qualifications, I have my notes here, for Native American Renaissance are, let's see, I have to get up a little close because I don't have my glasses on because I'm wearing costume. It was originally coined by Kenneth Lincoln, is, let's see, they have 3 elements: reclamation of heritage through literary expression, discovery and reevaluation of early texts by Native American authors, and renewed interest in customary tribal artistic expression. And when she goes into, the imagery commonly used as far as nature and the wisdom of the animals and the trees. So that is today's episode of Poetry in the Patio, or in this case, Poetry in the Boudoir. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or concerns, or you want to bring up a certain topic, or if you have a particular author as your favorite, feel free to comment below. And remember, happy Halloween, stay delightfully offensive, and glitter covers all your sins. Goodbye.